Do you really think you can just walk in here unnoticed? The words cut through the soft hum of the morning coffee shop like a sharp breeze, drawing the attention of a few patrons who had been quietly scrolling on their phones, sipping on their steaming cups of latte and cappuccino. Angela Thompson adjusted the strap of her sleek black briefcase as she moved past the warm aroma of freshly ground beans, her tailored navy suit perfectly aligned with her professional composure, and her polished black shoes making a soft tap against the hardwood floor. Outside, the city streets glistened under the early sun, cars gliding along the asphalt as the faint sound of a street musician's guitar mingled with the distant hum of traffic. Angela's eyes scanned the menu board above the counter, but her mind was on the meticulous planning of her day, reviewing documents in her head, mentally ticking off each meeting, each briefing, each call she had scheduled with precision. At that moment, Officer Daniel Parker stepped inside, his polished badge glinting under the overhead lights, posture rigid, eyes scanning the crowd with a scrutinizing intensity that made a few customers instinctively straighten their backs. He moved toward the counter with a deliberate pace, the click of his polished boots echoing faintly, and his gaze landed on Angela, narrowing as he sized her up. The ambient chatter seemed to dim in Angela's perception, her breathing steady, her expression calm yet alert, a subtle tension running through her frame as though she was aware of being observed yet unflinching in her presence. Parker's voice, firm but tinged with impatience, called out for identification, and Angela reached into her briefcase, fingers brushing over the smooth leather, revealing a neatly folded badge embossed with the FBI insignia. The officer's eyebrows lifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, but he maintained his composure, speaking again, testing the boundaries of authority with measured words that carried a slight edge. Patrons glanced over, some whispering under their breath, sensing the subtle shift in energy that rippled through the room. Angela's gaze remained steady, meeting Parker's eyes without a word, her silence speaking volumes, projecting an unshakable confidence that emanated from her experience, her discipline, and her innate understanding of power dynamics in every situation she encountered. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows cast long, warm beams across the wooden floor, illuminating the polished surfaces of the espresso machines and the subtle steam rising from cups, painting a cinematic tableau that captured both serenity and tension in the same frame. Angela's mind briefly reflected on the countless moments in her career where appearances deceived and assumptions faltered, recognizing that her calm in the face of scrutiny was itself a form of influence, a reminder that perception could be as powerful as action. Parker shifted slightly, the weight of expectation pressing upon him as Angela maintained her posture, calm, composed, her lips pressing together just enough to convey attentiveness, and the subtle rhythm of her breathing echoing a controlled steadiness. A small group of customers exchanged quick glances, sensing that something consequential was unfolding, yet unable to articulate exactly what, as the quiet authority radiating from Angela seemed to bend the environment subtly, compelling attention without raising a hand, commanding focus without a single word. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the delicate tension contained within the warm walls of the coffee shop. Yet within, every movement, every glance, every measured breath carried the promise of revelation, hinting at the forthcoming moment when quiet authority would assert itself fully, when assumptions would be challenged, and the ordinary rhythm of a morning coffee run would intersect with a display of restrained power and undeniable presence. Angela Thompson remained poised as she reached the counter, her hands resting lightly on the smooth surface, eyes following the barista, who moved with fluid efficiency, steaming milk and pouring espresso with precision. The subtle hiss of the machines mixed with the soft hum of a playlist that drifted through the shop, creating an oddly serene backdrop to the palpable tension between her and Officer Parker. He shifted his weight from one polished boot to the other, glancing at the identification badge again, as if confirming what he had seen was not some elaborate mistake. Angela kept her posture steady, straightening her shoulders slightly, each movement deliberate, signaling calm confidence, while simultaneously projecting the awareness that she was fully present, fully in control, and fully capable of responding if the situation escalated. The barista, sensing the underlying tension, paused briefly, eyes flicking toward Angela with a polite curiosity before returning to his task, the soft clinking of cups and saucers accentuating the stillness that had settled between the two. Angela's mind wandered for a brief moment, reflecting on the countless encounters she had navigated where perception was everything, where composure could be more influential than words, and where patience often revealed the truth faster than any confrontation could. She considered the patrons around her, noting their subtle reactions, the way some had leaned slightly forward, intrigued but hesitant, and how others had pulled their phones from their pockets, capturing moments without being certain why these moments mattered. Outside the tall glass windows, sunlight reflected off the pavement, and a few early commuters passed by, unaware of the subtle but meaningful exchange inside the shop. Angela lifted her gaze to meet Parker's once more, her expression unwavering, allowing the silence to speak volumes. And in that silence, there was power, a quiet insistence that her presence was legitimate and her purpose unquestionable. Parker cleared his throat, attempting to reassert control with a clipped question, testing boundaries, and Angela responded not with words immediately, but with a steady, measured glance, conveying acknowledgement without submission, a reminder that authority was not exclusively his domain. The soft aroma of roasted coffee beans lingered between them, mixing with the faint undertone of vanilla from a nearby pastry display, providing a sensory contrast to the intensity of the moment. Angela reached slowly for her cup, lifting it with a deliberate grace, the motion smooth, controlled, reinforcing the calm demeanor she projected and reminding Parker subtly that she moved with intention and clarity, not haste. Each small detail, from the polished edges of her briefcase to the carefully aligned creases in her suit, contributed to a visual message of precision and discipline, quietly signaling the depth of her professional experience and the seriousness with which she approached every encounter. Parker's eyes flickered to the corner of her badge, a silent acknowledgement that he understood the stakes, even if he could not yet articulate the shift occurring in the room. Patrons continued to sip their drinks and murmur softly to each other, the ambient sound a steady backdrop that both masked and highlighted the tension between the two figures. Angela allowed a small, almost imperceptible nod toward the barista, a gesture that communicated courtesy and awareness without breaking the carefully maintained poise that had defined her presence since she entered the coffee shop. Time seemed to stretch, each second drawn out with the weight of anticipation, the quiet rhythm of breathing and ambient sounds creating a suspended moment that emphasized observation and composure over reaction. Every detail mattered, the polished floors reflecting light, the muted tones of the walls, the orderly arrangement of tables and chairs, and the subtle gestures of those present, all contributing to a sense that this was not simply a routine interaction, but a demonstration of careful awareness, restraint, and the quiet assertion of presence in a world that often misjudged appearances. Angela sipped her coffee deliberately, eyes scanning the room, posture unwavering, every action calculated to maintain calm authority while observing every subtle shift in Parker's stance, every micro-expression that hinted at reconsideration, and every movement from the surrounding patrons that indicated their awareness of the gravity of the encounter unfolding before them. Angela Thompson set her coffee cup down with a precise, deliberate motion, the soft clink against the porcelain saucer barely audible above the muted hum of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. She straightened her posture, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, and allowed a calm sweep of her gaze to take in the room, noting the subtle shift in the atmosphere as Officer Parker lingered, adjusting his tie and clearing his throat, an almost imperceptible tension threading through his movements. The patrons, a quiet mix of early morning regulars and hurried commuters, glanced up from their drinks and devices, sensing the undercurrent of something extraordinary unfolding without fully understanding its weight. Angela's hands rested lightly on the briefcase at her side, fingers tracing the smooth edges, a quiet reminder of the professionalism and discipline contained within her. The sun filtered through the tall glass windows, creating soft patterns of light on the wooden floor, casting elongated shadows of chairs and small tables, highlighting the contrast between the ordinary cafe setting and the charged interaction at the counter. Parker took a cautious step closer, voice steady but tinged with a measured authority, questioning details of her order and identification, and Angela responded not with agitation, but with composed acknowledgement, eyes meeting his, conveying both awareness and quiet control, the kind of presence that filled a room without a single word. Her mind traced over the brief moments of the morning, noting the rhythm of movements, the subtle gestures of patrons shifting slightly in their seats, the faint tapping of keys on laptops, the distant rumble of traffic outside, all filtered through her focus, each detail a component in the intricate awareness that defined her career. The barista, moving with practiced grace, handed Angela a freshly poured latte, the steam curling upward in gentle wisps, and she accepted it with a measured nod, her attention never wavering from Parker, who observed, caught between professional obligation and the unexpected awareness that he was facing someone far beyond the ordinary assumptions of rank or authority. A small child at a nearby table shifted in her seat, glancing curiously toward Angela, sensing a quiet command in her presence, and the soft murmur of conversation paused just slightly, the collective energy of the cafe attuning subtly to the tension that was building, unspoken but palpable. Angela lifted her cup slowly, inhaling the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the action deliberate, emphasizing calm control, and Parker's brow furrowed in recognition, the shift subtle yet undeniable as he noted the professional certainty radiating from her posture and movements. Time seemed to stretch, elongated by the careful, measured cadence of their interaction, the ordinary sounds of the cafe, the whir of the grinder, the soft music playing from hidden speakers, the muted clatter of dishes, creating a backdrop that heightened the focus on their exchange. Angela's eyes flicked briefly to the window, observing the street beyond, the early morning sunlight reflecting off the windshields of parked cars, pedestrians moving in their own rhythms, unaware of the silent authority that shaped the moment inside. Her lips pressed together lightly, a subtle expression of attentiveness, while Parker shifted, a half step, an adjustment that mirrored his recognition of the equilibrium subtly tipping. Every movement, every pause, every careful breath was a dance of awareness, a balance of observation and restraint, projecting calm yet unmistakable authority, a signal that assumptions based on appearance or circumstance held little weight against the quiet confidence of a professional who had long mastered the art of presence, patience, and subtle command of her environment. The air, warmed slightly by the cafe lights and the sun streaming in, carried the scent of roasted coffee beans and pastries, grounding the scene in normalcy even as the extraordinary tension between Angela and Parker shaped every glance, every shift in posture, every pause, creating a moment suspended in anticipation, where perception and composure met and where the next subtle move could set the tone for the unfolding revelation. The faint chime of the door opening signaled the arrival of another customer, and Angela's attention briefly shifted to the glass pane, observing a woman entering with a brisk, purposeful stride. The barista greeted her with a warm smile, and Angela returned a subtle nod before her focus returned fully to Officer Parker, whose stance had shifted slightly, a subtle sign that he was beginning to reassess the situation, though his pride and sense of protocol still tethered him to cautious authority. The morning light through the tall windows created streaks across the floor, casting patterns that moved slowly as the sun climbed higher, illuminating the polished edges of the counter and the gleaming espresso machines, every detail emphasizing the quiet precision of the environment. Angela's eyes scanned the room once more, noting the slight movements of other patrons, the casual gestures of someone stirring sugar into coffee, the shuffle of feet as a person rose to leave. Yet all these normal actions were underscored by the tension radiating between her and Parker, an invisible current that subtly altered the energy of the space. She took a measured sip from her cup, the warmth of the beverage a grounding presence as she considered the layers of observation and inference, aware of how a single action or glance could ripple through the room, shaping perceptions and commanding attention without uttering a single word. Parker's gaze lingered on the badge, the embossed letters catching the sunlight, a tangible confirmation of her position, yet he did not step back. Instead, he straightened his posture, the tension in his shoulders visible as he struggled between enforcement and recognition of authority he had not anticipated confronting. Angela shifted slightly, crossing one leg over the other in a composed manner, a subtle adjustment that maintained balance and elegance while reinforcing the sense that she was in control of both her movement and the unfolding interaction. The hum of conversation rose and fell around them, a rhythm punctuated by the soft hiss of steam from the espresso machine and the clatter of a spoon against a saucer, creating an auditory texture that grounded the scene in everyday normalcy, while the dynamics between the two individuals remained anything but ordinary. Angela allowed a slow, deliberate glance around the cafe, observing details, the alignment of chairs, the glint of sunlight on glassware, the minor movements of hands and heads, the barely perceptible shifts in posture that betrayed attention and curiosity, and, in that observation, she projected awareness and authority, reinforcing the subtle dominance of presence over mere words. Parker cleared his throat, a small, calculated motion, as if attempting to regain composure or assert professional confidence. Yet the effort seemed to acknowledge Angela's quiet influence over the situation, a recognition that authority was not singular, that it could exist without demonstration through volume or force. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the warmth of the morning air, creating a sensory backdrop that contrasted with the measured intensity of the human exchange, highlighting the ordinary surroundings against the extraordinary display of calm and presence. Angela sipped again, each motion deliberate, punctuating the rhythm of the encounter, while Parker's eyes flickered, micro-expressions revealing subtle reconsideration as he processed the reality that the situation was far more complex than he had anticipated. The cafe remained filled with the soft sounds of a morning routine, yet every movement, every glance, every pause between Angela and Parker carried weight, building an invisible framework of respect, recognition, and anticipation, a quiet narrative of observation, patience, and understated authority that suggested the next moments would reveal far more than the simple act of a coffee order. Angela Thompson slowly set her cup down again, letting the warmth of the coffee linger in her hands for a brief moment before returning her focus fully to the subtle energy shifts in the room. Her eyes traced the contours of the counter, the polished wood reflecting the morning sunlight that streamed through the wide windows, casting long, golden lines across the floor and illuminating the faint motes of dust that floated in the air. The cafe was alive with low murmurs and the gentle clinking of ceramic and glass. Yet in the midst of it, the tension between her and Officer Parker seemed to create a bubble of quiet intensity, an invisible stage where every small gesture carried weight. She noticed the slight twitch in his jaw, the way his hands hovered just above the edge of the counter, and the way his posture stiffened minutely as he recalibrated his perception of the situation. Angela's fingers rested lightly on the smooth surface of her briefcase, feeling the subtle texture beneath her touch, a quiet anchor that reinforced her composed presence. She allowed a brief scan of the patrons nearby, noting the gentle shifts in attention, the way a few had paused mid-sip or mid-scroll, sensing that the dynamic in the room was charged with unspoken significance, yet none could fully articulate why. The soft notes of background music wove through the air, blending with the faint hiss of the espresso machine and the occasional thump of a grinder, creating an auditory landscape that was both ordinary and somehow heightened, amplifying the anticipation that filled the space. Angela lifted her gaze slowly, allowing her eyes to meet Parker's once more, steady, unwavering, conveying confidence without aggression, authority without intimidation, a subtle insistence that her presence was grounded in competence and calm. Parker's eyes shifted briefly to the floor before returning to her, a flicker of uncertainty passing across his expression, a microsecond that spoke volumes about the realization dawning within him. Yet he remained tethered to professional demeanor, struggling to reconcile expectation with observation. The sunlight highlighted the precise angles of Angela's suit, the crisp lines of her jacket and pants, the polished edges of her shoes, creating a visual cadence that matched the measured rhythm of her breathing and subtle gestures. Each small movement, each tilt of the head, each deliberate nod toward the barista or the patrons was infused with awareness, projecting quiet command without a word, a lesson in the potency of presence and restraint. Outside, the city continued its morning rhythm, oblivious to the layers of observation and recalibration occurring inside the warm walls of the cafe, pedestrians moving past the glass with hurried steps, car engines humming gently, streetlights reflecting in shiny windshields, the ordinary flow of the day contrasting with the heightened awareness within. Angela shifted slightly, the movement so subtle it could have gone unnoticed, yet it reinforced the balance and poise she maintained, the careful negotiation of space, energy, and perception that defined her professional life. She allowed a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, letting the warmth settle, her eyes flicking briefly to Parker's badge, noting the glint as it caught the light, a quiet acknowledgement of position, yet she remained undeterred, projecting composure and measured authority that made the room seem simultaneously ordinary and charged with quiet expectation. The air smelled faintly of roasted beans and sweet pastries, mingling with the morning light, creating a sensory backdrop that accentuated the contrast between the cafe's usual calm and the subtle gravity of the unfolding exchange, each breath, glance, and movement contributing to a rhythm of observation, anticipation, and understated presence that suggested the coming moments would reveal the true measure of awareness, patience, and authority embodied in Angela Thompson. Angela Thompson's gaze swept the cafe once more, a calm but piercing assessment of the room and its occupants, her eyes lingering on subtle gestures and micro-expressions that spoke volumes about the perception of authority and awareness. She allowed a small, almost imperceptible exhale, a measured release of breath that carried with it quiet confidence and the knowledge that she maintained control of the narrative unfolding around her. The sunlight continued to pour through the wide windows, accentuating the sharp lines of her tailored suit, the polished shine of her shoes, and the deliberate precision of her movements as she shifted slightly to reach for a napkin, maintaining the fluidity and grace that defined her presence. Officer Parker's shoulders tensed subtly, his gaze darting momentarily to the identification badge in her hand, the metallic letters catching the light and reflecting an authority he had not fully accounted for, a realization settling in silently as he adjusted his stance, weighing procedural adherence against the undeniable poise before him. Patrons stirred quietly, some lowering their phones, others pausing mid-conversation, their awareness heightened as though sensing the gravity of an exchange that was more intricate than a simple morning interaction. Angela's mind moved through layers of observation, noting the position of every hand, every posture, the subtle ways people shifted in their chairs, the minute sounds of footsteps or the scraping of a chair leg, each detail providing insight and reinforcing her situational awareness. She sipped her coffee with deliberate slowness, allowing the warmth to anchor her composure while signaling a quiet rhythm of confidence that contrasted the slight tension radiating from Parker. His eyes flicked to her cup, then back to her face, a flicker of recognition passing in the briefest of moments as he recalculated the impression he had formed, the assumption of control subtly undermined by the measured, professional authority Angela embodied. The soft hum of background music, the clatter of dishes, the occasional hiss of steam from the espresso machine, all blended into a sensory landscape that emphasized the ordinary setting. Yet within that normalcy, the dynamics of perception, power, and awareness played out with silent intensity. Angela adjusted her briefcase strap with a small, deliberate movement, each gesture reinforcing calm precision. An unspoken signal that she navigated her space with intent and understanding, commanding attention without raising her voice, asserting presence without confrontation. Parker shifted again, almost imperceptibly, a micro-expression betraying the dawning awareness of the disparity between expectation and reality, while Angela's posture remained steadfast, her gaze meeting his in a way that communicated both acknowledgement and subtle authority, the tension now underscored with mutual recognition of professional acumen. Outside, the city moved through its morning cadence, oblivious to the quiet recalibration within the coffee shop. Yet inside, every breath, glance, and movement carried weight, a demonstration of situational mastery and patience. Angela allowed a slow rotation of her head to take in the entire room, the alignment of tables, the polished counters, the glint of sunlight on glass and metal surfaces, and the subtle motions of customers as they navigated their morning routines, all while maintaining her composure and measured attention, reinforcing an invisible but undeniable presence that dictated the rhythm of observation and awareness within the space. Her lips pressed together lightly, her eyes scanning each detail, her hands resting with poised deliberation, and the soft clink of her coffee cup against the saucer punctuated the silent statement she made, that authority, awareness, and control existed not in volume or force, but in the deliberate, patient, and composed management of presence, perception, and the unfolding environment, setting the stage for the forthcoming moments of clarity, recognition, and the quiet shift in understanding that was about to redefine the dynamic entirely. Angela Thompson placed her coffee cup back on the saucer with deliberate care, her movements unhurried, controlled, and precise, as though each action carried a subtle message of authority and composure. Her gaze swept the cafe once more, taking in every detail, the alignment of chairs, the small tables, the patrons' subtle shifts in posture, and the glint of sunlight off glass and metal surfaces, all contributing to an environment she navigated with complete awareness. Officer Parker's stance remained rigid, his eyes flicking repeatedly between her and the badge that gleamed faintly in the morning light, a tangible reminder of the authority she possessed and the professional weight behind it. Angela's mind mapped the situation carefully, analyzing micro-expressions, the cadence of speech from nearby patrons, the quiet murmur of conversations blending with the soft background music, the occasional hiss of steam from the espresso machine, all forming a subtle orchestration of observation and situational awareness. She adjusted the strap of her briefcase slightly, a controlled gesture that reinforced her presence without a word, signaling that she was fully aware of the dynamics at play and comfortable in the center of attention. Parker's hand hovered near the counter, his fingers curling slightly as though poised to interject, but the deliberate calm in Angela's posture and the steady focus in her eyes created a quiet command that subtly altered the energy in the room, drawing his attention inward, forcing him to recalibrate each thought and motion in the presence of someone who carried both authority and measured patience. Angela lifted her gaze, scanning the space beyond Parker to the wider cafe, noting the soft reactions of the patrons, the gentle shifts of bodies in chairs, the faint rustle of paper or the quiet click of a spoon against ceramic. Each sound filtered through the lens of her awareness, reinforcing the sense that she controlled not only her own presence, but also influenced the ambient perception of everyone around her. She took a slow, measured sip of coffee, allowing the warmth to settle and the aroma to provide a sensory anchor, her eyes never leaving Parker as the subtle acknowledgement of her authority began to register in his posture, the tightening of his shoulders, the faint lift of an eyebrow, each micro-movement reflecting an unspoken recognition of the unexpected dynamic he faced. The sunlight continued to illuminate the cafe, highlighting the clean lines of Angela's suit, the polished surfaces around her, and the rhythm of her composed breathing, creating a visual cadence that mirrored the internal calm she projected. Patrons, some sipping coffee, some typing on laptops, remained quietly attentive, their peripheral awareness catching the tension and unspoken narrative unfolding, sensing that the ordinary morning had shifted into a subtle demonstration of presence, control, and observation. Angela allowed a slight tilt of her head, a minimal gesture, yet one that communicated awareness, attentiveness, and readiness, reinforcing the quiet but unmistakable authority she held. Parker's eyes momentarily met hers, a flicker of understanding crossing his expression, the realization of her professional capacity beginning to outweigh his assumptions, yet he maintained outward composure, grappling internally with the subtle shift in power. The ambient sounds, the low hum of conversation, the occasional clatter of dishes, the hiss of espresso, provided a normal backdrop, but the tension and awareness threaded through it, a quiet reminder that perception and authority were as significant as any words or overt action. Angela allowed herself a controlled exhale, a small, deliberate gesture of ease that contrasted with the subtle tension surrounding Parker, a signal of measured control that reinforced the quiet assertion of presence, patience, and professional authority. Each gesture, glance, and motion carried a deliberate purpose, a symphony of observation and awareness, preparing the moment for recognition, understanding, and the eventual shift in perception that would subtly, but undeniably, redefine the dynamics in the cafe and the unfolding narrative between them. Angela Thompson straightened fully, her posture radiating calm authority, and in a deliberate motion, she lifted her identification badge from her briefcase and held it in clear view, the light catching the embossed letters and symbol in a way that commanded attention without a single word being spoken. Officer Parker's eyes widened subtly, the tension in his shoulders and the tight grip on the edge of the counter betraying his sudden recognition, an internal realization that he was facing someone whose authority far surpassed his expectations. Patrons in the cafe instinctively leaned back or paused mid-action, noticing the shift in energy, a quiet anticipation settling over the room as the ambient sounds, the hiss of the espresso machine, the soft clinking of cups, the faint murmur of conversation, became secondary to the unspoken revelation occurring at the center of the space. Angela allowed a measured exhale, her gaze never wavering, her presence alone projecting an unmistakable competence, a clarity that commanded recognition and recalibrated the perception of everyone present. Parker's stance faltered almost imperceptibly, a subtle step backward, his mind processing the layers of authority he had not accounted for, the assumptions he had carried unraveling quietly yet completely as he observed her calm and precise demeanor. The sunlight continued to spill through the tall windows, highlighting the smooth lines of Angela's suit, the polished shine of her shoes, and the deliberate control in every movement she made, creating a visual emphasis on the composure and assurance she embodied. Patrons glanced at each other in brief, hushed acknowledgments, sensing that something extraordinary had quietly taken place, though no words were needed to communicate the magnitude of the moment. Angela's fingers rested lightly on the counter as she inclined her head just slightly, a gesture of professional acknowledgement, and Parker's eyes flicked back and forth between her and the badge, registering the reality that her position carried tangible weight and influence far beyond what he had imagined. The cafe remained filled with the soft sounds of morning activity, yet the dynamic had shifted, a quiet equilibrium established where awareness, authority, and composure had spoken louder than any verbal exchange could. Angela moved with deliberate ease to retrieve her coffee, each motion purposeful, reinforcing the calm and control that defined her presence, while Parker remained momentarily still, reconciling his initial assumptions with the undeniable truth of her professional stature. Outside, the city continued its usual morning rhythm, traffic humming softly along the streets, pedestrians moving with habitual steps, entirely unaware of the subtle but profound recalibration occurring within the cafe, yet inside, every glance, every measured movement carried weight, emphasizing the quiet authority and mastery of presence Angela maintained. The soft aroma of coffee and pastries mingled with the sunlight filtering through the windows, creating an ordinary backdrop that contrasted the extraordinary recognition now settled across the room. Each patron, each movement, and each small sound and note in the unfolding awareness of power and respect. Angela's gaze returned to Parker, steady and unwavering, and in that quiet, sustained connection, the unspoken understanding was clear. The assumptions he had carried had been gently, yet undeniably overturned. The authority she held fully recognized, and the room itself seemed to pause, as if the ordinary morning had transformed into a lesson in observation, composure, and the subtle but absolute presence of true professional authority. Angela Thompson gathered her briefcase with measured precision, the soft click of the latches echoing subtly across the polished wooden counter, a quiet punctuation to the series of deliberate actions that had commanded the room. She took a slow, steady breath, allowing the warmth of her coffee to anchor her composure as her gaze swept the cafe one final time, noting each patron, each subtle shift in posture, each minute gesture that had carried silent recognition of the authority she embodied. Officer Parker remained near the counter, his stance slightly less rigid, eyes following her movements with a new awareness, the weight of unanticipated respect subtly altering his approach and internal calculations. Angela moved with deliberate grace toward the door, each step measured, the polished soles of her shoes creating soft taps against the floor that punctuated her presence without raising a sound, her posture maintaining perfect alignment and poise. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows bathed the cafe in a warm glow, catching the edges of her suit, the shine of her briefcase, and the subtle highlights in her hair, reinforcing the visual cadence of calm authority and composed presence. Patrons subtly adjusted in their seats, the quiet murmurs and sips of coffee now punctuated by glances toward her, recognizing without words the shift in the dynamic and the demonstration of measured professional power that had unfolded before them. Angela's eyes flicked briefly to Parker, a small, controlled nod acknowledging the shared understanding that had quietly developed, an unspoken communication that conveyed recognition of her position and the legitimacy of her authority, reshaping the perception that had initially been assumed. Outside, the city moved in its ordinary rhythm, cars gliding along the asphalt, pedestrians hurrying along sidewalks, streetlights reflecting off windshields, entirely unaware of the quiet culmination of awareness, patience, and authority that had transpired within the cafe. Angela reached the door, the handle cool beneath her hand, and she paused for a moment, allowing a final sweep of her gaze across the space, noting the subtle ways the morning light interacted with surfaces, the reflection in the windows, the small, unnoticed movements of those around her, all while maintaining an unbroken composure that anchored the room's energy. Parker's shoulders relaxed slightly, a micro-expression of acknowledgement passing across his face as he processed the unfolding reality, the quiet reversal of assumptions, and the lesson embedded in the measured, professional authority Angela had exhibited. The air within the cafe carried the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and pastries, mingling with the sunlight and the soft hum of morning activity, creating a sensory backdrop that emphasized the contrast between ordinary routine and the extraordinary demonstration of calm, observation, and mastery of presence that had quietly defined the interaction. Angela opened the door fully and stepped into the morning light, the subtle warmth of the sun on her skin reinforcing her measured, deliberate rhythm, each step forward signaling movement through the world with awareness, precision, and composed authority. Behind her, Parker watched, a quiet reflection in his posture, a subtle recalibration of understanding, the recognition that assumptions could be gently yet undeniably overturned through observation, patience, and the unspoken demonstration of true professional presence. The cafe returned to its ordinary cadence, yet the memory of her presence, her control of the space, and the nuanced authority she projected lingered, leaving a quiet imprint on the environment and on those who had borne witness to the calm, deliberate, and undeniable assertion of competence and poise. Angela's stride carried her down the street, sunlight glinting off her briefcase, the rhythm of her steps steady, purposeful, and serene, a testament to the quiet power of observation, patience, and professional authority fully realized, leaving the scene behind her transformed not by words, but by the enduring presence she had projected.